You tell your child something, is it in one ear, out the other? Can they hold on to it, right? So the typical parenting strategies, they do not work for ADHD brains. The problem isn't you, the problem is the strategies.
My son is 3, he's gonna be 4. Does my kid have ADHD? Like, what do I do if I suspect it?
They will feel like something is really difficult for them. They might be struggling in school. I think even taking a step back, where a lot of parents first think is, do I pursue a formal diagnosis or not?
Hi,
How are you?
we're doing great.
Honestly, I'm not doing great today. I accidentally was served a caffeinated coffee instead of a decaf coffee at a coffee shop nearby, and I am literally spinning out of control. I feel like I'm moving at hyper speed, but everything else is going way too slowly, and I'm honestly just like jittery and all over the place.
Welcome to my brain. This is exactly how I feel all the time. For me, it's ADHD though. It's not caffeine. This is just like my daily life, which is why I'm very excited that we have Dr. Carrie Jackson on with us today on the podcast.
So how do we spot ADHD early? What the hell do we do about it if we think our kid has ADHD? Do we even want them to be diagnosed? Is it different for girls and boys? All of these things will be answered today with Dr. Carrie. Thank goodness, because I have a lot of questions.
Our conversation with Dr. Carrie is going to be so incredibly insightful.
Even if you're not worried about your kids having ADHD, you probably know another kid with ADHD, because 1 in 9 will be diagnosed with ADHD in their lifetime, which is insane. Even if you're not worried about your own kids, there's so much to take away here. So tune in and yeah, let's talk.
Hello, Dr. Carrie. Welcome to We're Doing Great. I want to dive headfirst into this topic of ADHD in kids because it hits so close to home for so many parents. To be frank, it also hits really close to home for myself because I had a late diagnosis only 4 years ago with ADHD, kind of like autism with ADHD in some ways. And I feel that there are so many misconceptions about ADHD in kids. Everyone and their mom seems to have an opinion about ADHD in kids. We feel the pressure as parents to, like, either we're being told we're ignoring the signs, we're burying our heads in the sand, or kids are getting misdiagnosed left and right. So I wanted to start off the conversation by asking you, like, the most burning question that we all have as parents. How does ADHD really show up in kids?
It is not what we used to think about ADHD. You're 100% right. I mean, ADHD looks different for everybody who is diagnosed with ADHD. So for kids, it can look like getting out of your seat when you're at school, kind of running around and being really like wild is what some parents will describe it as. But for a lot of parents, they don't realize that those types of symptoms, while they happen for every single child, for ADHD kids, it's like another level. So some parents, they may think, wow, my child is really active, but also maybe being a mom is just super hard. And then it's only once their child goes to school that they see like, oh, something is a little bit different. And actually, maybe my child does need some support because of this ADHD. But at the same time, it can also look like just daydreaming and missing everything that's going on in class. So it really does look different for every single child.
Is there an age where it kicks in?
That is such a great question. If there's an age where ADHD kicks in, and what we know about ADHD right now is that it is something that is typically going to show very early signs. So like when kids are 4 years old, for example, but a lot of parents that I work with, they will say when my child was a toddler or an infant, they struggled a lot with sleep. They were just super active. I couldn't get them to calm down. And so those signs, maybe they're even earlier than 4 years old, but honestly, it's really tough to diagnose it prior to 4 years old, or even sometimes at 6 years old. That's the earliest. But if you're a parent and you're seeing these signs at like 2, 3 years old, it is possible that it is ADHD, but they may not be able to be diagnosed yet.
I can see that. I feel like one of the things that I do as an adult with ADHD is like I stim a lot. So I will be fidgeting with like the little tags on my clothing. And that's something that my mom told me I was already doing as a baby when I was like trying to fall asleep in my crib. So I feel like even there, like it could already have been presenting as ADHD. Do you find that like it appears differently in girls versus in boys?
Yes, we know that girls are more likely to be diagnosed with inattentive ADHD, which a lot of people, they will say ADD, right? So you've probably heard the term ADD. That is actually not considered a diagnosis anymore in the US, and it's actually all under ADHD now. But inattentive symptoms are more likely to show up for girls. So that's like the daydreaming, kind of off in their own world, like just zoning out a lot of the times. And there's a couple reasons why it may be more likely for girls to be inattentive. Some is that that's how girls are more so socialized, right? So for boys, it's kind of typical for the boys will be boys, right? And just like to be a little bit more wild and rambunctious. But for girls, it is much more socially acceptable for them to be more quiet and kind of listening in, but then off in their own world still. So definitely does present differently with girls. And because of that, girls are diagnosed later also, even as you shared, Esther.
Exactly.
Can I ask a question here? You kind of touched on something very interesting that I want to dive into more, which is about these gender stereotypes. And when I had my son, who's 3, I was like, he's not going to be like the typical boy's boy, but he is. And I feel like I've done nothing to cultivate that, but it's just happening. Is there really something about boys and girls at this very young age that you're seeing in your practice that is truly like defined by these gender stereotypes? And then how does that relate to the ADHD diagnoses that you can uncover?
Yeah, I think it's a very big question because even thinking about the gender stereotypes, so all of our diagnostic like criteria, so how we diagnose ADHD, that was actually initially based on boys. And so, I mean, thinking about stereotypes in that way, it is very different than what we now know about ADHD. But what you were saying about like how even people look at individuals like boys and girls, like when they're younger, that absolutely influences if teachers might point out that your child is struggling in school with hyperactivity. Because if they're a boy, maybe for example, like teachers may think, oh, well, it's more likely for boys to have ADHD. So I'm looking out for these signs, but teachers may miss the inattentive symptoms. So that absolutely does affect how we see ADHD show up, but then also how we are going to even notice it and identify it. One important thing I want to note is hormones really affect ADHD. And for girls, oh my goodness, like the puberty time period, it's tough for everybody, right? But that is when actually the puberty changes and hormone changes worsen ADHD symptoms and can lead to more girls being diagnosed because it becomes more apparent they have ADHD.
I'm going to share a very short personal story. So my diagnosis came only a couple of years ago. And when I had my diagnosis, I realized that my mom also has ADHD. She is she's a high functioning ADHD person. Like she has all of her routines in place that make her life go smoothly. But at the same time, she's never used a calendar in her life. Everything is lists, everything is like little notes scrambled here and there. And once I started to recognize the signs in myself, I recognized so many ADHD symptoms in my mom as well. So now I grew up as a child always thinking that that there was something wrong with me. That everyone knew that there was something wrong with me, but they weren't telling me to spare my feelings or something. But there was always this hint of, why are things so easy for them, but not for me? Diagnosing girls had been better when I was a kid. I would have probably been diagnosed way earlier instead of finding out only as a grown-up. So now as a parent, I'm struggling with trying to self-diagnose my kids in a way, not really diagnosing them officially, but I fear that I can't, I want to spot it early so I can support them in the way that they need. But I'm also wondering, am I reading too much into it? But I also know that I think it's genetic. So can you elaborate on is it actually genetic, and are these traits being passed down from parent to parent, or how does that work exactly?
You brought up so many things that I want to touch on, but I'll start with the genetic piece. And it is very, very much so genetic. ADHD has a big genetic factor, that doesn't mean that environment doesn't play a role, but it is going to run in families. So for parents and for kids, for grandparents, siblings even, it is very, very common just based on genes for it to be passed down. We don't know one single gene that is associated with ADHD. Unfortunately, it's more so like a combination of genes that are affecting ADHD. Your story about looking for the signs in ADHD in your kids and wanting to be aware of it is super important because like you don't want your children to struggle in the same way. And a lot of parents feel that way. And also a lot of parents that I worked with, they will either discover their own diagnosis after their child is diagnosed or the reverse, right? So you will discover your child has ADHD because you're more aware of what it looks like. And it's great that you are doing that and you're on the lookout. And it's also super, super tough to really be objective or unbiased about it. You're right. And that is normal for every single parent. And that's where an evaluator, like a pediatrician, a psychologist, or a therapist can be so, so helpful for just helping you get that clarity that you might need with understanding your child's diagnosis.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you if you like real life, real deep, can I swear on this podcast? Like deep shit is like you're in the day, you're like, shit, does my kid have ADHD? Like, what do you do? What are the steps you take as a parent? Like, please tell me my son is 3, he's going to be 4. This is like prime time to be on the lookout. It sounds like, what should I know about that? And what do I do if I suspect it?
I think even taking a step back where a lot of parents first think is, do I pursue a formal diagnosis or not, right? So that is a big question that a lot of parents have right now. And what you were saying, Esther, about your own experience, I think is what a lot of kids end up experiencing themselves too. So they will feel like something is really difficult for them. They might be struggling in school. And at the same time, it's like they are attributing it to who they are as a person. But a diagnosis can really separate it out for them. So that is really what I would say looking at as your first step as a parent is, okay, is this diagnosis of ADHD what is going on, or is it something else? And the way you could do that is first reaching out to your pediatrician, I would say is a great step. Even if your pediatrician says, hey, ADHD isn't what's going on, or they want to refer you for a fuller evaluation, it is so important that you can get support as a parent regardless. So even if ADHD is not what's going on, I do want parents to know that there are different options for support, like especially parenting groups, online parenting classes. Those are all going to be so helpful. But first step at 3 or 4, talk to your pediatrician about it.
There are so many things that how I parent my kids. I'm always wondering, like, am I doing it right? And would I do it differently if I had like an official diagnosis? Because there are so many different ways you can approach parenting and you can approach supporting your kids. But what works for a neurotypical kid is so different from what works for a neurodiverse kid somewhere on a spectrum. I wanted to ask you, what are like some typical strategies that don't always work for ADHD kids that might work for neurotypical kids or vice versa?
Yes. So the typical parenting strategies, they do not work for ADHD brains. And most of the time, that is leading to parents feel like they are bad parents or that it is just incredibly hard to be a parent, which it is. It is super tough. I say this, I'm an aunt, so not a parent, but still I can see how tough it is. But with that being said, like the things that you're using as a parent that you're probably finding online, if they weren't made for ADHD brains, the problem isn't you, the problem is the strategies. So one of the most common like neurotypical type of parenting strategies I see online involves doing a lot of talking through things. So essentially like telling your kids what they should be doing. So if your ADHD child forgets their water bottle at school, when they get home, talking a lot about it, that is not going to work for your ADHD child because there is this thing called working memory with ADHD, which is essentially like, okay, if you tell your child something, is it in one ear, out the other? Can they hold on to it, right? So working memory is tough for ADHD. So if you're telling your child, hey, you need to remember your water bottle, you need to get that tomorrow, that is going to be in and out of their mind much faster and before they even need to use that and do that the next day. So biggest advice is do not focus on talking as much. Less words will be so much more effective for ADHD kids.
Okay, I have 2 questions on that. So if I'm asking my kid to remember something and he's struggling to remember, could that be a sign of ADHD, or am I now overthinking this?
Everybody does forget things, but so if I was in your position, I would think about how often is this happening and is it impacting or impairing their daily life, right? So for most people, they will forget things sometimes, but for ADHD people, it's usually happening multiple times a week. And it could be leading to a lot of like significant consequences. So for adults, for example, forgetting your passport multiple times when you're going to the airport, that is like a bad thing if you don't have an ID, right? And then for kids also, forgetting your homework, you are really struggling with your grades, not because you aren't smart or not because you can't do the work, but you're forgetting it. You're forgetting it at home. So that's going to be a very key indicator for you, is thinking about how often and what's it really affecting for them.
So less words, but more what? What do we do instead?
Well, more environmental support. Okay. So think about like systems. So with less words, I would say more visuals, less words, less talking, more of the like in your face visuals of what to do. I think that one of the best things you can have as a parent is to literally make time real for your kids. So time does not exist unless they can see it physically and get that physical reminder of it. So you should be having clocks in almost every part of your room, including the bathrooms, to help them with staying on time when they're ready, including like right by the door, for example, so they know when they need to leave. Those physical reminders are going to be more helpful than you saying, hey, we've got 5 minutes to leave, because in their brain it's like, well, how long is 5 minutes? They need the physical reminders of it.
That's awesome. I'm going to go buy some clocks.
Oh, there's a really cute one I have. It's a timer that kids love, and it's got like a rainbow that slowly disappears.
I know that one. That's so good. But like it's like a countdown
cool.
timer, right? Like so it's not really a clock. It's more like you have X amount of minutes left. Yeah, that's an adorable one.
I need this. Okay, we're going to put that in the show notes because I need it. You talked before about seeking a diagnosis or not. I think a lot of parents are wondering this, like, why wouldn't you seek a diagnosis? Or what are some of the pros and cons that we should be thinking about when we're deciding if we even want to know if our kid has ADHD?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I hear from parents is that they are worried that a diagnosis will lead to kids feeling different, that they don't want them to be stigmatized, because unfortunately, mental health is very stigmatized, right? And I understand that they don't want their child to be labeled. More often than not, though, what I see is that once there is a diagnosis, it actually does bring some relief to both parents and kids. So it really does put like a name to the struggles they are experiencing. And we have been lucky in the way that a lot of people are coming forward with their own individual ADHD diagnoses. And a lot of kids even are talking about it amongst their friends, which I think is helpful, because kids, they may feel like, I'm the only person who has ADHD. And I'm like, you probably have four kids at least in your classroom alone who have ADHD. So that's without a doubt the biggest con that I see from a lot of families that I worked with. But with any diagnosis, it can open up options for support. So certainly like a diagnosis of ADHD can open up better understanding of your child, but it can also open up support at school, like in the US potentially, if your child's struggling in school, a 504 or an IEP potentially. You could explore other treatment options too, though, like therapy and medication as well. So it can help you just understand better and look at the supports for that diagnosis.
That's so helpful, because I recently read that 1 in 9 kids will be diagnosed with ADHD in their lifetime. 1 in 9. So why do over 6.5 million kids in the US have ADHD since, in the last couple of years? That was the last metric I read, but I think it was from 2022. But I'd love to know why diagnoses are on the rise, why so many kids have it. Is it something in the water? That's such an old saying, but or is it because we're so much more aware of it now? Can you share a little bit of information on that?
Yeah. So, well, even looking at things from an awareness perspective, I think is important, right? So there's a lot more awareness around what ADHD looks like, but there's actually been some changes in the diagnostic criteria. So what ADHD is. ADHD, it is considered something that when you are born with it or when you have ADHD as a child, it does typically get better as you go into adulthood, but at the same time, it's not something that is like curable. It is something that just changes over time as you age. So with that, the diagnosis has changed. So it used to be that you had to have these symptoms before 7 years old. We actually know that that is not accurate. And so we changed the diagnostic criteria psychologists did in our diagnostic manual. And it's now symptoms before 12 years old. And that is interesting because there's actually even more research showing that just if you have symptoms at a younger age, like even through like high school and young adulthood, it is still probably ADHD that is going on if you meet the criteria and have the evaluation. So changing the age essentially is one of the reasons I would say that it has definitely become more present, but certainly just a big awareness around it. I will say that there is some emerging research also on how, just in general, women are having kids at a later age. And there is some evidence coming out that there's some like environmental factors in the way that genes are like changing or mutating over time with increases in the later pregnancies that can potentially affect it. This is across the board. So it's not saying like if you have a pregnancy at a later age, it's saying like across the board for people. These are just changes that we're seeing. Very complicated. There was something that you guys mentioned a minute ago, and I was like, oh, what is it? But it was something that I was like, oh, this may be helpful. Oh, one of the things that I want to mention with talking about like physical reminders for kids and just parenting strategies is a lot of parents, they will tell me routines do not work for their child, which I totally hear. I don't like routines in general, just as like an ADHD adult, but it can actually be helpful to look at like for the routines that you have. Let's say you have a visual routine for your child. One of the biggest problems that happens is like if your child is not seeing that routine, they're not going to be able to follow through on it. So like if you are having your child, okay, first step, they need to go downstairs, look at what's on their routine. That's going to be way more work for them. So it needs to be where they're actually doing it. And that's another way where the physical pieces can really come into play, like physical reminders of what to do.
Like a physical step-by-step board of like first this, then this, then this. Yeah, I could use that myself in my life. I can't stick to a routine if my life depended on it. Like I have a couple of them. Like I eat like, well, it's actually very two-sided. Either like I have been eating the same breakfast for literal years and I do not tire of it, or I've been trying to get back into like workouts for like the past 5 years and I always start it up. And whenever I start my new workout and I'm on the treadmill and I'm running and I feel like a new person. I'm like, this is it. I have turned the page. From now on, nothing can stop me anymore. This is my new life now. And then all of a sudden, like something happens. The wind blows a leaf from the tree and I'm out of the routine. It can just happen like that. It's so weird how things can throw me off. And all of a sudden, like it's 5 weeks on and I haven't been on a treadmill once. Whereas like when I'm in it, like there is no object permanence in that sense as well. Like I feel like once I'm doing it, I feel like nothing can stop me now. And as soon as I'm out of it, I'm like, nothing can get me on that treadmill ever again. And it's so funny, but at the same time, there's also so much shame involved in that because like, why can't I do this when it's so much easier for people? And I feel like there's this ADHD doesn't seem like it's being taken seriously. I worry for myself, for my own kids, like I want to circumvent the shame. I want to help them not just like learn to live with their ADHD. I want to help them, if they have ADHD, I want to help them thrive with their ADHD. This is all a very long-winded way of asking you, like, how can we make sure that like our kids are like, I don't want to take words into my mouth, like feel proud of their ADHD, but like, how can they just like have that self-confidence that I lacked as a child because of all these things I was not good at?
Yeah, I love talking about emotions with ADHD because it's another really big piece. And shame I see happen a lot. And shame is really a type of emotion where you start to think, I am a bad person, right? It's not I did something bad or I messed up. It's I am a bad person. I am not smart. It's a bigger label to yourself. And I often see this happening when kids, adults, ADHDers are not meeting the expectations they set for themselves, one of the biggest reasons why that happens is because we may set these expectations or goals for ourselves under perfect conditions, under a perfect day. But if you're trying to help your child set up a homework organizational system and you do it when they have gotten perfect sleep, they're fed, they haven't even started school, it's before school has started, it is setting them up to not manage it when things don't go the best, right? So you really want to create routines, skills, and systems under not optimal situations for yourself. And that will help you feel better when you are able to meet them first off, but then also it won't make you feel like as much shame when you start to struggle with meeting them, because nobody is 100% consistent. That's just unreasonable, right? And like letting yourself know that is really important. I also encourage parents to give your child a lot of positive praise. There is a misconception that praise is damaging and leads to people pleasing, but that's actually not accurate as long as you are giving praise that is genuine and that is specific too, right? And it's especially important for shame for kids because ADHD kids being impulsive, they may do things without thinking, right? They may say something they regret. They may accidentally do something that is not who they are. And focusing on evening out those times with the positive praise and noticing all the good is going to help your child realize, okay, I have a lot of positive qualities and I still make mistakes like everybody does, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad person.
It reminds me a lot of what Dr. Becky says about hitting, which is you're not a bad kid. You're a good kid having a hard time. And this is something I'm even practicing with my 3-year-old who's very in the thick of it right now with hitting and biting and managing emotions. And I do feel like he'll get like in trouble at daycare, for example, for hitting another kid. But the circumstances of that is also very up in the air. Like we never get what I'll call the truth because we don't have full context because we're not in the classroom with him and the teachers are overwhelmed and there's a bunch of kids and they're all screaming at each other. And I hate it when my son comes home and he's dysregulated and I asked him what happened and he said, I hit someone and I got yelled at or so-and-so put me in a corner or whatever. And I feel so sad for him because he is such a good kid, but he is just having a hard time. And that feels like, honestly, like a parenting mantra in general. Like a lot of these young kids just don't have the capacity yet to manage a lot of these emotions, especially if you have an ADHD diagnosis on top of that. I mean, can you share any insights or tips about like how we make sure that our kids are seen and understood and that like if I think a lot of us we're always worrying. I mean, social media is rampant. Like I'm constantly being targeted with things like how to identify autism in your newborn and I'm like, oh my god, like is she autistic? Like I'm not even terrified of the diagnosis. I'm terrified of missing it. And that is where the fear comes from for me as a parent. And Esther and I have talked about this a bunch. And I would love to hear from you, like how you think about that. How can we show up in the best way for our kids and make sure we're not missing stuff and that we're supporting them well?
Yeah, for supporting your kids, have you ever heard, there's a quote that goes something like, the way that you speak to yourself becomes your internal dialogue. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think about very similarly for kids. So the way that you speak to your kids becomes their internal dialogue also. Right? So the way that you are speaking to them is going to be how they are speaking to themselves too. And so the more that you are able to speak to them in a way that is, yes, definitely supportive and validating of their emotions and also acknowledging the positives, that is going to be how they can speak to themselves. And that will go a long way with supporting them. But for anybody, I mean, it's important to like that your child has a supportive environment, and that includes like grandparents, aunts, uncles, tons of people, right? And, there's going to be like different ways people may react to how your child responds or reacts. So they may even not know much about ADHD. But if your child is struggling with ADHD or if it's something they've been diagnosed with, I do recommend talking to the teacher about it and sharing like what you found is helpful at home, or also sharing that with like the grandparents, right, who are going to be just talking to them and supporting them, because you want everybody to be as on the same page as possible, which I know is not always possible at all, right? But you want everybody to know what's going on with your child. Yeah. I wanted to let parents know that if your child is talking about like, I'm a bad kid, I'm a good kid, I do want parents to really remember and think about from the perspective of a child that it's very, very typical to view things in this all or nothing, good versus bad. Like if we think about good guys, bad guys, and fairy tales, that's how they're being brought up. And so if your child is saying that they are a bad person, this is an opportunity for you to like correct their language and the way of thinking like, oh, you are a great kid. Everybody makes mistakes. Let's come up with something else we can say, right? So I'm a great kid, but I did made a mistake with this. I'll try better next time. So it's something that kids are learning and that you can absolutely support your child with.
That's such a wonderful phrase that I will definitely be taking with me tomorrow with both my kids. I want to wrap up the conversation by asking you like one final question. What is the one thing every parent you think should remember about raising a child diagnosed with ADHD? Like, what is the one thing that they have to keep in mind?
The one thing that I want parents to take away is that your ADHD child, they are truly trying their best. And some of the things that they're doing, it can feel like it's on purpose or effortful. But if you always remind yourself, ADHD is truly something that is different in their brain. And it's a difference just like any other physical difference. That will help you keep in mind, hey, they're not doing this on purpose. This is just tough for them.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah. You wouldn't demand a kid with no legs to walk.
I've seen the same thing with glasses where they're like, you wouldn't just ask a child who needs glasses, see better, or what. So you shouldn't tell a child with ADHD, just focus, right? Just do it. It's not that simple for ADHD. It's just like, I wear glasses, I wear contacts. I need them to see.
Yeah, period. And that's it. And that's where it comes back to defending our kids and really trying to get in their corner. This has been so interesting. Wow. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us and sharing all your wisdom.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I have loved chatting with you guys. Y'all are lovely. And I hope that all of the parents listening have been able to take away some really great things to use in their daily life, whether or not your child has ADHD. You probably know someone that does.
I bet.
Very true. Go find and follow Dr. Carrie Jackson. She is a licensed psychologist who specializes in ADHD in children and, bonus, has ADHD herself. She is a content creator. She is amazing. You can find her at drcarriejackson.com, CARRIE Jackson.com, and learn from her and interact with her and ask her questions because she's wonderful. Dr. Carrie Jackson, thank you so much for being here. Okay, and that's the pod. But please don't go anywhere yet. Don't press any buttons. Before you go, we want to remind you that We're Doing Great is brought to you by POC, an award-winning company reimagining how kids play and learn using technology. If you appreciated this episode, please give us 5 stars so other parents can come find us too. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Come find us on Instagram and TikTok at We're Doing Great Pod. We would love to talk to you and learn from you and just chat and be friends. And until then, don't forget you're doing great.